Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to the City of Brentwood Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of May 13th, 2015. If you all join me at the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Clint Lewis. Here. Jeff Moore.
Here.
John Number is here. Michael Daming.
Here.
Jennifer Hansen.
Here.
David Demmett.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Nurnberger. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes of the April 8th meeting? Are there any revisions to said minutes? Seeing none, they'll stand as submitted. We have one item under old business this evening, a petition to amend section 400.1320 pertaining to distance requirements for group homes. The commission will recall we took this up at the last meeting and asked Mr. Wise to obtain a legal opinion on the need for this change, which is contained within your packet. Mr. Wise, can you generally bring us up to speed, review this memorandum, and let us know your thoughts on this petition?
Sure. The kind of overarching theme of the opinion from the attorney is that basically the city has two options. The first being repeal the distance requirement altogether, or the second would be to amend the definition of group home so that it does not conflict with the city's definition of family. So essentially, if you fall under the definition of a family within the city's code, you would be considered a single-family use under state statute and permitted as a by right use within single-family districts as well. So with that recommendation, I think both of those are viable options, and I think that's fairly consistent with the discussion the commission had at the last meeting. I think previously, prior to November of 14, the city did not have a distance separation. This was something that was added in as part of the recodification. I think we've had one petition that's come before the city where this was raised, and that's where that stems from. Other than that one project, I'm not aware of any issues that have necessarily been raised within the city of Brentwood. With that said, I think if we were to simply amend keep the 500-foot distance separation and amend the definition, I don't see that necessarily being problematic either. There are no existing situations that staff is aware of that would negatively impact.
Okay, questions from commissioners? Thoughts from commissioners? Mr. Demmett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Justin, Stephanie Carr, who is the author of this memo?
Stephanie is with Hines. Oh goodness, they changed it. She's with Hines, Garrett, something in O'Keefe. I forget.
Is that Curtis Hines?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Kevin O'Keefe's firm.
And they serve as the city's legal counsel for special projects on planning and zoning items.
Okay. So this is outside of our city attorney.
That is correct. That is correct.
And why do we go to Curtis Hines for this?
We use them because they have a skill set and an expertise on municipal related items to planning and zoning.
Okay. That's all I had.
Other thoughts from commissioners? Yes, Ms. Hanson.
Thank you. Justin, Mr. Wise, did we have a conversation with Stephanie, or did we just receive the memo?
No, I spoke with her briefly as well. Is there something?
Yeah, did she have a preference or a recommended avenue between the two options?
No, I think that she thought either one of them would be defensible.
Then my thought would be to do number 2 and just amend the definition of the group home. I think it's, probably the path of least resistance and the easiest to do.
Agreed. Other thoughts from commissioners? Would any member of the audience like to address the commission on this petition? Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. I'll move to, let me make sure I state this properly. to amend the definition of group home so that homes with 3 or fewer disabled residents are not included for purposes of the distance requirement.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Roll call? Yeah, Mr. Wise.
Can I get the clarification? The existing code has a 2,500-foot separation, and this discussion stemmed from a discussion about changing that to 500 feet to be consistent with a HUD and Department of Justice case coming out of St. Peter's.
Yeah, and so I think my motion would include the
Okay.
reduction of the distance requirement to 500 feet as Stephanie Carr indicated in her memorandum.
No, that's a good point. I don't think her memorandum was clear on that subject.
On what?
So there's really two changes that are being proposed. One, the change to the definition of group home as reflected as option number 2 in the memorandum. And secondly, to reduce the distance requirement between group homes from the current 2,500 feet to the 500 foot. Mr. Nurnberger?
Just looking at her comment or whatever, it said something about the Fair Housing Act that cannot impose special or increased burdens on those who ever already face extraordinary challenges. Wouldn't that, do we have any other restriction on building a home close? Like, I think we put that restriction on 500 feet, we're still going to be in violation, aren't we?
The opinion that I've received from our attorney is that the 500-foot separation would be defensible.
But you would be putting a burden on somebody else that would, if I were to build a home, just a regular home, wouldn't be restricted, correct?
Correct.
So you're going to put, to me, we should not have the restriction on at all, if that's the case. If anybody else can build a home, somebody that wants to build a group home should be able to do it by the same code.
And I think that that's the opinion. Basically, it tries to get to that point by saying, if you fall within the definition of a family within the code, which is no more than 3 unrelated individuals, then you would be allowed as a by right without the distance separation. It is only if you were to exceed that number of individuals that the distance separation would come in.
And my understanding, just to piggyback on that from this memorandum, is that to the extent you do elect, that a body would choose to impose a burden, to the extent it is construed to be a burden, there has to be a rational interest. And the rational interest from this memorandum tells me that the rational interest that's been affirmed by the courts is to prevent institutional environments from congregating and taking place, being prevalent throughout a certain area of the city.
And we don't have any proposed group homes coming in right now.
We do not.
Okay.
Mr. Moore.
Which raises the question of why we turned away the group home down on Match. I mean, would that have been restrictive in the true definition of this statute?
I don't think that would be implicated at all here. This is really just a distance issue, group home next to another group home. Mr. Wise, correct me if...
I would agree with that, your statement.
Other discussion? There was a motion that was made by Ms. Hanson to make the 2 revisions to our code. I believe that motion was seconded. Is that correct?
Yes,
Who was the second?
me.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
Just, Mr. Chairman, just for clarification purposes, so that the definition would read as set out on page 2 of the memorandum, is that correct? In the top paragraph, it would now, any home in which 8 or fewer unrelated mentally or physically handicapped persons reside other than a family as such is defined in this code and may include 2 additional persons acting as house parents or guardians who need not be related to each other or to any other mentally or physically handicapped residing in the home. Is that correct? Okay.
Why don't may I amend and clarify my motion? So I'd like to move to amend the Brentwood Municipal Code with respect to group homes in two ways. First, reducing the distance requirement from 2,500 to 500 feet of another group home. And secondly, as indicated at the bottom of page 1 of the memorandum of Stephanie Carr, when it's option 2, where it begins amend the definition of quote group home to adopt that definition in its entirety. Clear?
Okay, motion seconded. Any further discussion? Everybody understand what's on the table? Roll call, please.
Clint Lewis,
Yes.
Jeff Moore,
Yes.
John Normer is yes. Damon Hanson,
Yes.
David Dimmitt.
Yes.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Nurnberger. First item under new business is a petition for site plan approval for building modifications at 2605 South Brentwood Boulevard, petitioner being Mesa Design Build on behalf of Apex Network Physical Therapy. Is the petitioner here? Will you please step forward, sir, introduce yourself, your address, and go ahead and provide a general overview of your petition.
My name is John Rodriguez. Address is at 443 Fairview Avenue. My name is John Rodriguez. The address is 443 Fairview Avenue, Webster Groves. I'm the architect working on the Apex Network Physical Therapy project. We're proposing to build or to make interior modifications and some minor exterior modifications to the building on South Brentwood for a physical therapy type business.
Okay, this is the Sprint building, is that correct?
Yes, it is. Mhm.
And will you be the only tenant occupant of this building now?
Yes, Apex will be the only tenant, yes.
Is there only one occupant in that building now?
Right now it's vacant, but there was only Sprint.
It was just Sprint?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Tell you what, we'll come back to you, but let's go to staff. Mr. Wise, staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject site is located at 2605 South Brentwood Boulevard. It's in just under 8,000 square foot lot. It looks a little bit deceiving when you drive by the property. To the south of it, there's a large grass area. That part is actually not a portion of this lot. The site is zoned PD, Planned Development Overlay District, and it currently has a 2,440 square foot building on the site. It was used for the previous Sprint store and has been vacant for some time. The applicant is proposing to make changes to the exterior of the building. Some of the changes include painting, adding a new kind of design feature along the Brentwood Boulevard frontage, adding an accessible ramp along the front of the building, the front being Brentwood Boulevard, and adding a couple landscaping planters along the entrance to the building as well. The comprehensive plan designates this parcel as neighborhood mixed use. In talking about neighborhood mixed use, I think the title is somewhat self-explanatory, that it's a service unlike the northern part of Brentwood, where we have larger big box retail development where it has a larger trade area. Businesses along this generally have a smaller trade area, smaller market area, with serving a lot of the surrounding community. A couple of the key points from the comprehensive plan that I called out in the staff report. The first, it talks about kind of some of the challenges with reutilizing or redevelopment of properties along the corridor with shallow parcel depths. The proposal doesn't increase the footprint, doesn't encroach into the residential areas, uses the existing improvements to facilitate the use. The other, excuse me, part from the comprehensive plan is on page 19. It talks about improving the aesthetics of the commercial properties, primarily focusing on the arterials, so in this case, Brentwood Boulevard. and bringing improvements to there to improve the overall feel of the entire corridor. Like I said, there are no changes to the current access to the site. So the current parking lot will essentially remain as is. They'll restripe it as it's been used in the past for the retail store. The site plan shows 9 parking spaces along there, and that is the minimum parking requirement for the use. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I mean, you got Brentwood Boulevard frontage. This is a very visible site, so, ordinarily I'd be inclined to refer this to site plan, but I'm willing to yield to whatever the commission would like to do. Open it up to questions, thoughts from commissioners. Mr. Moore?
I'm sorry, Mr. Rodriguez, any plans for resealing and striping the parking lot?
We were planning on restriping. I know that there is some areas in there that could use probably some work, so I mean, I think that's something that we could definitely do.
Yeah, that was the only observation I had in walking the property. I mean, you've obviously addressed the planters, and I'm sure some other commissioners will have some questions about that, but it is a visible property, and it seems to me that improving the asphalt appearance and the striping would be recommended.
Mr. Nuremberger?
Just curious, how wide are the planter boxes that they're proposing? They
I
look
think they're
like,
about 2 feet by 6 feet.
any chance you can maybe go double that to kind of give it, and also you had it noted as being planters with native ground cover. I think it should be something, I don't know what kind of bush, or I'm not a landscape person. I'm just saying something that you can see from the street along, and just make them a little bit wider, maybe 3 feet or 4 feet, so there's more ground to be. How high are they going to be as well?
Well, the planters themselves were going to be, probably a foot off of grade, and then the plants would be above that. Basically, they were kind of an integral design with the ramp, the new accessible ramp that we have, so kind of defining the entrance.
So entrance would be one way that you walk straight up, and then one way you go up the ramp?
Yeah, from the parking lot, the ramp runs parallel to the front of the building behind I'm sorry. So from the parking lot, the accessible ramp runs parallel to the building and would be defined by the planter that runs parallel to Brentwood. And then there's another planter that's perpendicular to Brentwood at the edge of our building, the southern edge.
Right.
Defining also the entry. So I guess there are 2 issues, is that we're pretty tight on space. Brentwood's been widened, I guess, since the
Right.
site plans that I've had. And so there's an existing monument sign out there, and with that monument sign, the sidewalk, I'm already pinched for space. So there would have to be modifications to something like to get it any wider. The one that runs parallel to Brentwood we'd have to make modifications, either doing something else with the monument sign. The other one that's perpendicular on the southern edge of the building, we could definitely make that one wider and probably lengthen that one some.
So you're talking about the ones that faces out to Brentwood, it's going to be a problem because of the sign?
Yeah, there's an existing monument sign there. There's a sidewalk, and then the monument sign will take almost the whole space to where
Is there any opportunity to do something around the sign that's, like a box or, something
Yeah.
like that? That would be leaving this alone, and then maybe doing something ground cover that way or whatever, some greenery of some sort or whatever. I know it's really difficult. Normally, we would require to have 2 street trees out on Brentwood, but I know you can't do that because of sidewalk. So, it's like, it's really difficult where you're at or whatever and that sort of thing. So if you can do something around a planter box. I don't know how to word that actually, but you know what I'm.
I think we can
meaning.
incorporate some additional planters areas around the sign
And
and,
it doesn't have to be a planter necessarily, but whatever looks good, I guess. So that's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Demmett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rodriguez, on your site plan, I don't see anything for a trash enclosure. Well, can you explain that to me?
well, the business really produces very little trash. I mean, it's basically office stuff, so that would be carried out, if there was a pickup. So there's just very, small amounts of trash. I mean, there are probably no more than 2 employees at a time, and they would be, the clients that would come in would be met by appointment. So again, it's more, they would maybe fill out a form and stuff like that. So again, there's just a really minimal amount of trash being.
So what happens to the trash that is generated, that will be generated?
Yeah,
How do
I
you
guess
dispose of that?
I don't know that I can answer your question exactly, but it would be similar to a residence where it would be taken out, on the trash day or.
Okay. Well,
I mean, there is areas in there that they could store it.
well, I'm going to defer to Mr. Wise on that. But I thought there was, isn't there some ordinance 400.1930 that talks about trash enclosures, and is it discretionary, or can you enlighten me on that?
If they have an outside dumpster, then it is required to be screened. If they don't have a dumpster that's utilized outside, they don't have to have a structure for that.
So if they have an actual just trash can that they keep inside the business.
Correct.
And then on pickup days, they roll it out to the curb, and then they take it back inside, there's no need for an enclosure.
That is correct.
But if they keep it outside all the time,
Then it
then
would
it needs
need
an
to be
enclosure.
screened, yes.
So your proposal would be to have the trash can or whatever inside all the
Yes.
time? Okay. I also noticed that there's a shed on the western portion of the property. Do you intend to use that at all, do you know, or?
Yeah, I don't know that's, not to my knowledge, they were not going to use that.
Are you leasing the space or are you buying? Or did you purchase?
Apex is leasing it from the landlord.
Okay. Is there anything we can do with that shed by chance? It's
I'm sure they're,
kind of an old-looking shed. If it's not being used, I'm just wondering if somehow we can spruce it up, eliminate it, or,
I can definitely propose that to them and see what they're.
okay. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Demmett. Other questions, Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Daming. On the, speaking of more grass or some trees up front, I noticed, Pasta Pronto across the way has like a tree and a couple of bushes and some mulch. Any way to come over to this side of the street around the stop sign, just inside the sidewalk, to kind of mirror image that part? So as we're, Brentwood Boulevard is going to be done here pretty soon with, I think, new curbs and new asphalt. It'd be nice to get some of these street corners to match up a little bit. I don't know if you can go back to the landlord or who's ever taken the space to see if they'd be willing to put some, maybe it's mulch instead of grass, so they don't have to cut it. And a couple of planters out there to break up some of the sidewalk and the parking lot and all that kind of stuff. Right at the, the northeast corner. That
Okay.
makes some sense.
Yeah, I think, that's something that they would consider, yeah.
Okay. And do you know how many people they have or appointments they're going to have each day? Is it more than Sprint or less than Sprint, or?
I visited 3 of their locations here in St. Louis, and the most amount of people that I've seen at one place was 5. And that was that they have a location up in Olivet, and that's a much bigger space. So I would guess that there's probably going to be 2 to 3 employees there,
Yeah.
and they have appointments with clients coming in to rehab. So there might be 2 additional people.
Yeah,
There'd be a receptionist and probably two therapists
Okay.
during the entire.
Good. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Nuremberger?
Yeah. Just to kind of follow up with David's comment about the storage, is that storage, what I guess it probably was approved long before us being on the commission or whatever. Is it something that we were allowed now, do you think? Justin, I'm sorry.
It's a difficult question to answer. In that the current site doesn't comply with all the new regulations.
Right.
For instance, the setbacks don't comply with our current regulations. So you couldn't build the existing building, nor could you place the shed in its current location under our current regulations. But like you mentioned, it's an existing improvement that's on the site. As far as simply approval of an accessory structure to a commercial property, that's something that would go through the site plan review process.
'Cause, yeah, I'm just saying, personally, I probably wouldn't approve of a new property coming in and wanting to put an outside shed when they have plenty of space inside or whatever, and you're not gonna use the shed, you don't need it for your lease or whatever. But the problem is you don't have the approval to be able, you can't say right now that the owner would take it down, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. I think that's where David was heading or whatever. If you could talk to the owner and see if he would be willing to take it down or whatever, as far as you're not going to use it, there's no real reason to have it out there on the site. So I think that would be a kind of a condition, letting us know, and you could go through the Justin as far as approval. If they say no, flat out no, well, I'm not sure how we would go forward. The other thing is your little sign that you kind of, little squiggly, that's a color, I say. Is this anything, it's just going to be open, or I'm not sure I understand what it's going to look like. Lit from behind, anything like that?
It would be an internally illuminated sign.
Okay.
So the green squiggly is a part of their logo. It's a mountain with the Apex network words, and then physical therapy is
You can see it a little bit better on the wall, the front wall or whatever. So I guess there's nothing else that's going to be below that sign? It's just going to be the mountain look?
it's the mountain with the words Apex network. I know my rendering is a little dark.
It's on there, John, you just.
Oh, so I guess it's going to show up more when it's built, right?
I'm old school. I'm used to doing stuff with a pencil and a paper, not on CAD. So
So it's going to say physical therapy or just the,
it'll say Apex network underneath the mountain,
okay,
and then in a linear, this is on the Madge side. It would say physical therapy.
okay. Just, it would be straight across,
Yes, it would
Yeah.
be more. It would be a linear, I guess, version of their signage.
okay. And it's going to be complete, all of it lit from behind, you're saying?
Yes, it would be internally illuminated.
All right. And that's on both signs, correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And that, the sign, there's no problem on the square footage of the sign being one tenant and two sides?
Right, because they have a commercial driveway off of the side street, they're permitted the second sign location.
That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nuremberger. It sounds, these are good comments. It sounds like the consensus of the commission would be to get some answers from the applicant with regard to the resealing of the lot, with regard to additional landscaping, both on the east side of the building and on the north side of the building. And frankly, it sounds as if the commission would like to see that shed removed. Would you be willing to check with your owner as to those items?
Certainly, yes.
Okay, very good. Any other questions from commissioners, or we can take this up at site plan? Any member of the audience like to address the commission on this application? Please step forward, Ms. Charbonneau, and give us your name and address.
Lee Charbonneau, 8833 Madge. Mr. Rodriguez, please thank your client for coming and saving us from the yellow awning of the Sprint building. I don't know which composition of the P&Z approved that, but since Mr. Moore had to bring up BH, during one of the hearings at the Board of Aldermen, one of the audience members who was pro-BH blamed us on Madge for the yellow awning. So I just am very glad to see the yellow awning. A green mountain looks fine to me. I do understand your concern, though, to get some visibility. And since I'm a master gardener and I live 8 houses, I'll be delighted to come down and advise you on grasses that'll go in those planter boxes. I agree that the short grass would be much better if we had some. So thank you very much.
Great. Please come to site plan, Ms. Charbonneau.
Oh, probably.
Great. Any other member of the audience like to address the commission? Okay, seeing none, our site plan meeting is set for May the 27th. And I believe the commissioners like to have that meeting at 6 p.m. Does that work for the commission? Does that work for you, Mr. Rodriguez? May 27th at 6? Then we'll look forward to seeing you if you wouldn't mind checking with your owner as to those concerns that we talked about tonight, and we'll look forward to seeing you on May 27th.
I'm sorry. Just one, what color is an awning? I forgot to ask. Is it?
It'll be a silver gray.
That okay?
Okay, very good. We'll see you May 27th, Mr. Rodriguez. Next item on the agenda under new business is a petition for site plan approval to add additional parking at 8837 and 8839 Manchester. Petitioner Noble Capital LLC. Sir, if you could step forward, introduce yourself, your address, and your application.
Yeah, my name's Charlie Winkler. I'm at 8837 and 8839 Manchester Road. We're here tonight to increase the parking space that is currently there right now on 8837 and 8839. Me and my business partner own both buildings. One is being used as a mortgage office and one is being used as like a rental office. We manage properties and stuff like that. The mortgage company will get more traffic than the rental building. The rental building's basically going to be there for signing leases, dropping off rent pay, things of that nature. Currently, we have 4 spots. We'd like to increase that and add 12 spots. We have already put up a privacy fence, and we look to observe the 12-foot cushion in between our space and any residential behind us. What else? We also want to make sure that there's room. Right now, as it currently sits, we have redone both buildings, put siding on, new roofs, new windows. We've really cleaned the face of the building up, and we want to just improve the grounds around the building. We got a variance for our green space to reduce it by like 10%, where we're at 81% blacktop area, and then 29% or 19% green space. So we plan on just cleaning up the lot. Right now, it's just a backyard of basically two older homes. And with it, the way it is currently, just when we are all there working and our cars are there, there's no spots for anybody else or handicap for that matter. So we're just trying to improve the lot and also make it more conducive for clients and customers and things of that nature.
I'm sorry, was it Mr. Iverson?
Mr. Winkler.
Winkler, okay. Mr. Winkler, when a visitor currently exits the lot, how does that visitor exit your property?
They would have to reverse and then pull out there. There's an entrance in front of 8837 and an entrance in front of 8839, and then a curb that kind of separates both of them. But it is fully blacktopped in the front of the building, so it's kind of, you just kind of got to jockey your car around and then get out.
I mean, do you have to back out onto Manchester, I guess is
No,
the
you
question?
don't.
You don't?
There's probably about 30 feet in between Manchester and the front of our buildings. So there's enough room to pull in. And the way the parking spots are set up right now, you pull in kind of sideways, and then there's a buffer in between both buildings that you can back into and then back out safely. So.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Wise, staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject site is a 12,887 square foot area located on the north side of Manchester Road, west of Brentwood Boulevard. It's zoned GC General Commercial District. There are 2 buildings currently on the site. One is 861 square feet, one is 860, for a total of 1,721 square feet of structure on the site. Based on the current conditions, the property was not able to comply with the city's minimum parking requirements, which required 6 spaces on the site. I've been working with the property owner on several issues, and on that issue, they submitted an application to the Board of Adjustment, and last month, the Board of Adjustment did approve the variance to allow the increase in the maximum lot coverage to a maximum of 81%, to allow them the capability, subject to approval of a site plan, for the site to comply with the city's minimum parking requirements. Again, this site is a neighborhood mixed-use site in the comprehensive plan. Many of the same issues that are talked about in the last application apply to this one. The applicant did note they have installed a fence, they have sided the buildings, they've put new roofs on it. They've done a lot of property maintenance work that particularly my department really appreciated them being on the ball with and really working with us on those. Again, they're using the existing buildings as they stand. They're just adding parking to the rear of it. There is an existing hillside on the back of the property. I believe the proposal is that at the beginning of that 12-foot transition yard from the commercial property to the residential property, a retaining wall would be installed, and then that slope would be regraded up to the fence line to basically provide a clean and safe and compliant buffer area that's also structurally sound with the retaining wall in that location. Similar to the last application that was brought up on the use of the trash, there is not a trash enclosure shown on the site plan for this. In my discussions with the property owner, it will be handled similar to the last applicant, where the trash will be kept indoors and then only brought outdoors for pickup. I think that's particularly important with this application. If you were to look at page 2 of the staff report, it shows kind of a bird's eye view of the proposal. And you'll notice to the north of the subject property, there is an existing residential home that's set further back, so it's fairly close in proximity to this site. So adding a trash enclosure on the site would mean it would either be very close to that residential home, or it would be right up against Manchester Road, neither of which are desirable. So again, the site coverage, it does exceed the minimum requirement. However, it is compliant with the variance that was granted through the Board of Adjustment. The site does comply with the setback in the minimum transition yard between residential and commercial properties, with the 12-foot landscape buffer being provided.
Mr. Winkler, have you been in touch with your neighbors to the north about this proposal?
I have talked with the lady that is directly behind us, and then there is another neighbor next to her who I have not been able to contact or talk with about the proposed area. I think just in like casual conversation, we mentioned that we are trying to put a parking lot back there, not going over exactly what our plans were. And then we do own the property that is to the right of the lady directly behind us, so that's not a concern of ours.
Is that the dollhouse?
No, the dollhouse we haven't talked with. Actually, we have talked with her, and she thinks it's great what we're doing, because right now she is used to looking at a barren backyard that was fairly overgrown with a bunch of weeds and trees and stuff like that, which we have since taken out.
Well, those residents to the north are the, well, they're the most important people that I'd like to hear from. So I will
Sure.
be interested to see if they are here this evening. But subject to that, any questions from commissioners? Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Winkler, have you made any specific accommodation for grading and drainage, perhaps retention of rainwater once the lot has been set in?
Yeah, the person that we hired to do the asphalting and excavating and all that is going to properly grade the parking lot itself to make sure that it's not going into either buildings, and we'll just, you know.
My first thought was making sure it doesn't go west to the
Yes.
neighbor to the west.
No, it will not. The natural grade goes out towards Manchester Road.
Okay. I mean, the plan may not be required, Justin, but I don't see any drainage marked on it.
Right.
And I think that's fairly consistent along Manchester Road. Most of the stormwater along there kind of sheet flows off the properties to, there are a couple where we have area inlets that pick it up and take it under Manchester Road. Many of them pick it up in Manchester Road through the swales that are along there.
As long as it's noted that it's a question of mine.
Sure. And we fully intend to make sure that the water exits towards Manchester as opposed to the surrounding residential.
Very well.
Mr. Devitt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Winkler, how long have you been in this building?
We've been in this building now, we were granted occupancy of 8837 first, about 2 months ago.
Okay.
Then we were just currently granted occupancy of 8839 about a week ago.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, is it your inclination, or the chair's inclination, that this would go to site plan review?
Oh, I'm open to the will of the commission. I'd especially like to know if there's any audience members, you know, that's my primary concern.
Okay. Because I have a number of questions about landscaping around the building, and I didn't want to take up the time of the commission tonight if we're going to talk about this. Maybe that's a better way to do it, is to talk about it in a couple of weeks
Right.
when we meet again. But that being the case, I've noticed on the back, I'd like to see some more information on how you plan on some type of a rendering with this retaining wall, this proposed retaining wall. 'Cause as I look at, when I was on the property today, I noticed that there are varying slopes or grades
Sure.
on that, and it's, you know, and I know you just moved in, so you haven't had much time to do it, and the fence looks great, incidentally.
Yeah, thank you.
But I'd like to see what that's going to look like.
Sure, and I can explain it really quickly for you. What we plan on doing is building about a 3-foot retaining wall clear across the back there, kind of right where that slope comes down into where the parking lot would be. And then we're taking all that existing land that we're going to be having to grade off anyway to build the parking lot and putting up on that hill to make it all an even grade across into that 3-foot retaining wall.
Okay.
Mulching the entire area up there, putting down weed mat, making sure that it doesn't just become overgrown with weeds, and then putting some evergreen trees and stuff like that up along the back.
Okay, well, I'd like to, I think that sounds great, and I'd like to see that, if
Sure.
you can put something together so we can, a better visual of that.
Okay.
And we can incorporate that into the site plan. And then around the base of the buildings, if we'd recommend to the Board of Aldermen that they should approve this, is it your plan of, when you pave this area, that you would then pave everything, or just what is dirt right now? Well, the reason I say that is
We are planning on fixing the current asphalt that is there,
Okay.
as well as adding so everything would be uniform throughout the
Okay.
property.
And that's all I was getting to, because I noticed there's a lot of broken up pieces, especially along the base of one of those buildings, where I'd like to see that cleaned up and
Sure.
redone. And then as well, if we get back together in a couple of weeks, the planters that are out front. I'd like to see what your plans are for that as well.
Sure.
Because there's a nice looking planter
Yes.
there, and you could put something in there, kind of make the front of that building look nice.
And we fully intend to.
Okay,
Yes.
that would be wonderful. And finally, as to the easternmost building, I noticed that and maybe that would be fixed with the, with you repaving it. Again, there's just grass, looks like it's
That
broken
will be
through there.
paved.
Okay.
Yes.
And so I'm assuming that the commode that is sitting on the back porch isn't a permanent fixture?
You don't like that?
He's going to
I'm used to it being on the front porch. Okay.
Planter, I think.
No, that is being removed tomorrow.
All right.
So-
And then the trailers are there simply to kind of help clean up the property, I guess, or?
No, those are part of our operation as far as the rental side is concerned. We do property management, so we need those trailers to haul what is being stored in the basement, which is like lawnmowers and stuff like that to keep our properties cleaned up. And the dump trailer, not both of them will be there full-time. They're usually jockeyed around from place to place, but yes, since we had just wrapped up work on those buildings, they've been sitting there for probably more than they've normally would.
Where do you plan on, and maybe we can get into this more in site plan, but where do you plan on putting those if this is ultimately approved? Right where they currently are, or?
No, they would be parked in the 2 parking spots that are shown behind 8837.
Which one's that? Is that the eastern property or the western, the 8830?
It's the eastern property.
The eastern one, okay.
So there's 2 spots that kind of
Okay,
come right behind there.
all right.
And that is fully fenced in all the way around there. So the trailers, we picked those spots because then those trailers are blocked from view on Manchester Road.
That's what I was-
So
yeah.
when you're driving by, you don't see trailers.
Yeah, I just want to keep that out of,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I think Mr. Demitz made a compelling case for referring this to site plan. So if there's any commissioners that would like to identify issues that they'd like the applicant to address before site plan, otherwise let's take this up at site plan.
just,
Nurnberger?
yeah, I'm sorry. It's going to be 2 parcels. You have 2 pieces of land, and you're going to combine them into basically one, 2 different users. Are they both under contract or ownership of the same entity? So do we
Yes.
have to make that part of the whole plan or whatever? I'm just thinking in the future, if they decide to sell one of them and not the other, it could be an issue, it being a shared situation.
Yeah, I would think, Mr. Wise, correct me if I'm wrong, but to the extent that this application contemplates the 2 parcels together, to the extent one was sold, certainly any change to the either parcel moving forward would require then site plan review by this commission.
That's correct. And also with it coming forward in this fashion, if one parcel were to be separated and come back as an isolated application, we would review that in light of it being approved previously as a single application to ensure that it didn't negatively impact something else that was done.
You know, I just thought it should be discussed
Yeah,
and
no, good point.
make sure that we have it all clear, that sort of thing. And I'm fully about David and the landscape plan, would want to really see what you're going to prepare to do, because we want to be able to make sure that the city or our staff have enough to go from and that sort of thing. So, thank you.
Other commissioner comments? Is there any member of the audience who would like to address the commission on this? Please step forward, ma'am.
Hi.
Could you introduce yourself and your address for the record?
Carol Flaherty, 8832 Powell.
Okay.
I've got a question. My house is the one that sits on the back of the lot. And these cars are going to be parked 12 foot from bedroom windows. I mean, that's a little close, and since I'm so hard to get a hold of, nobody's attempted to get a hold of me from this gentleman's company, because I'm home 95% of the time. But anyway, they put up a fence, of which I really didn't care. They cut the trees down. Now we hear all the noise from Manchester. Now they're going to park in my basically 2 back bedrooms. I think that's a little close to my house when they have already have a retaining wall behind Mrs. Timmerberg's house at 8832, and then they've just bought the house. That's the next house east of Mrs. Timmerberg's house. And their houses are up on the front of Powell. Why can't they park most of these cars behind that property instead of where it's right in my windows? And I mean, and they haven't done, they put this fence up that's cheap wood. If you brush against it, it cuts your skin. Very rough wood. And then they have gaps this far from the bottom of the fence where they tore down the old fence and pulled dirt and everything out. And they cut off the pipes from the old fence post, and they're still sticking out of the ground. They haven't done anything to the hill. The rain last week has been washing it away. It's going to rain again this weekend. It's washing away even more. Why didn't they fix the hill and then put the fence up? Because it looks terrible. I mean, they've done a beautiful job of restoring those houses down there, and I know they're working hard, but I don't like the fence, and I don't like the idea of the cars parked in the bedroom windows. I mean, because we have the windows open if it's nice outside. I don't even like air conditioning. My husband doesn't. And we have and we're in the back of the house more than we are the front of the house. So, you know, they're going to be parking right in my windows, and the noise from the cars, starting them and everything else, I mean, it's too close to my house. I mean, I don't care that they put parking back there, but not in my back windows.
Ma'am, what was your last name?
Flaherty?
Okay, thank you for coming tonight. Mr. Winkler, you need to make Ms. Flaherty happy before our site plan meeting. So
And
we'll look.
nobody has tried to contact me. Nobody.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ms. Flaherty. I'd like to
I'm
extend.
home. That black truck sitting in that driveway?
I think I've talked with your
Okay. Okay, hang on, we do need to proceed here.
and I will definitely be up.
Good, very good, thank you, Mr. Winkler.
We've owned that house since 1960.
And Ms. Flaherty, you are formally invited to our site plan meeting on May 27th at 6 o'clock. We hope to see you there. Okay, very good. Any other member of the audience like to address the commission? Any further thoughts from commissioners? Very good. Mr. Winkler, we'll look forward to seeing you on May 27th at 6 p.m. here, and please do get in touch with your neighbors in advance of that meeting. And if you could also address the comments regarding landscape, retaining wall, and planters that you heard tonight, we would appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Next item under new business is the petition for site plan approval and amendments to a site plan for Deerbergs. Is the petitioner here? Please step forward, sir, introduce yourself and your petition.
Good evening. My name is Mark Martin. I'm Director of Construction for Deerbergs Markets. I have with me also Terry Dowdy in the audience. He's our architect and the architect of this project. So if we have questions that for him, he could address those personally. And thank you, Mr. Commissioner and commissioners and staff for making time for us. Appreciate that. And yes, we are requesting site plan approval for building modifications and amended signage. I believe that Justin's done an excellent job in summarizing our request, and it appears that's your process to have his summary read, so I'll defer to that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wise, staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject site is a 14.8 acre site located off Eager Road, zoned PD plan development. The building in question was approved as Building B on the original site plan, so there's several different buildings that are part of the Brentwood Point development. Building B is a 70,201 square foot building. Just for reference, this is essentially the Deerbergs, the main building along the front there. The proposal, it's on the east side of Building B, so if you're looking at the building itself standing in the parking lot, it's on the left side of the building. The change that they're proposing is they're essentially moving, if you look at the site plan, They've got a main entry feature that bumps out towards the parking lot, and then it starts to set in as you move away from that main entry. On the eastern side of the building, they're basically proposing to move that wall 5 feet further towards the parking lot on the area. If you're familiar with the building itself, it has a covered roof in this area with a pedestrian walkway. So they would be staying under that area that has a covered roof and just extending 5 feet further, putting a new wall in that would match the existing, as well as some storefront treatments along that as well. In addition, we anticipate that there will be future submittals for several changes on the interior of the building, and that's really what's driving the proposed changes to the signage themselves. To kind of detail what those changes are when you're looking at the building, the applicant has submitted an elevation, and it shows the existing signage on the top with the proposed signage on the bottom. So I'll just kind of run through those changes quick. The existing florist and gifts, it says Deerberg's Florist and Gift sign that's located on the right would be relocated to the left side of the entry, and the Deerberg's portion of it would be removed and just say Florist and Gift. So that sign would be shrinking. As we move to the right, above the entry feature, they're proposing a Starbucks coffee sign. Continue to move right to the next entry feature, which is where they would relocate the pharmacy sign to. And then as we continue down where the existing florist sign is, they have a spot for a future tenant sign at that location. That sign, if you flip to there's an exterior signage exhibit that's in your packet. On the bottom of it, it shows that future sign is a 27.2 square foot sign, and the Starbucks sign at an 89.5 square foot sign. So those two signs are new, and then the floor sign and the pharmacy signs are existing signs that are being relocated. One final note, with the amendments to the sign regulations that were approved not too long ago, there were revisions to the comprehensive sign plan section of the code. So on page 3 of the staff report under the recommendation, I've included what the factors that are included in the ordinance in reviewing signage requests to help the commission in their consideration of the additional signage.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Weiss. So we're looking at new aluminum and glass, a little more aluminum and glass on the, I guess, south side of the building, and 2 new signs. Does that sum it all up?
That's basically it, yes.
Okay. Comments from commissioners? Mr. Demmett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Martin, first of all, I agree. Mr. Wise does a great job, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
Yeah. Really, the only question, issues that I have is to the extent this proposed new construction would encroach upon the existing walkway or sidewalk, whatever. And according to your drawings here, it looks like as what we currently have under where the roof is, it's approximately 11 feet from the existing planters to the wall of the structure.
That's accurate.
Okay.
That's right there. I think it may be 11'2" in the actual measurement, but that's accurate in terms of speed. And what we have there now is a covered portico. It's a covered walkway.
Okay.
Currently, so we're leaving 5+ feet. That's 5 feet and some change for a free access for pedestrian travel. Currently, the space that on your drawing is shown in a red color, which is the 260 feet that we're adding to the footprint. That space is queued today with shopping carts.
Right.
So it's really not. To be honest, that 5.5 feet's not really going to be lost. We store our carts there currently, and what we want to do is get our carts inside, so that our customers have a dry, clean cart. And that's what this plan reflects with the new expansion of the entry and change of the entry. And the carts will be inside.
And that's exactly, you read my mind. That was going to be my next question. I just want to make sure that the carts then, we're not going to get pushed out into that walkway. The game plan is to move all of the carts inside.
That's correct.
what you have currently in that walkway is a bar that, if you can see the photograph here, that the carts are resting
The
on.
cart
That's-
stop.
Is that going to be eliminated then, I'm assuming?
That's correct.
Okay.
You were there, apparently, you've got some photos. We just recently cleaned up all those planters. I don't know if you noticed that on your travels over there, and put in a nice concrete edger, which really pulls the sidewalks back and cleans them up and
Right.
opens them up
It
very
looks-
nicely.
It looks great. I think the signs look great. Those were the only questions I had were under the portico. Thank you.
Mr. Nurnberger?
Two questions. The tenant space you're talking about on the west side, I guess, new tenant, is that currently being used by Deerberg's Flowers and Gifts, or was that a free space or whatever, or you?
Your first inclination is exactly right. Currently, Deerberg's Florist and Gift is in that footprint, in that space, right behind the sign.
Right.
We're relocating our florist to the other end, just beyond the shopping carts you see on this drawing. And we're going to locate our florist next to the new Starbucks kiosk inside. So you'll walk in that front door, and you'll approach the Starbucks kiosk, and just to the left of that will be the new location of our Florists and Gifts.
So does new walls have to be constructed inside the space to accommodate another tenant?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
We'll spring from the corner of the current pharmacy footprint on the inside, and then close it back to the outside wall. It'll create about a 1,100-foot space for a tenant. The door's already there. It'll be the same door we use today to enter and exit the florist.
And then I'm guessing that Justin, you said there are going to be interior modifications that have to be approved after this that are inside that is going to have to come through the city? Is that correct?
Correct, through the building department. So as they go through and start moving all of this around, it'll get submitted in for the building department, so for review
Yeah, and that
inspections.
would just be based upon the codes or whatever that
Correct.
apply. The other point I had is on the middle section, you have some, it looks like outdoor seating that is noted on the plan or whatever. I think that's what it is, and that, maybe I'm wrong.
You're correct.
So is it currently
Yes,
there?
that's there today, yes. Mhm. And so are the bollards. The small round circles right behind the curb, those are concrete bollards, and they exist today also.
Right. I guess I don't remember when it came before having outdoor seating approved, but probably if there's there, that's, you just indicated what's there, so that's fine. Thank you, Barry.
Anyone else? Okay, any member of the audience would like to address the commission on this petition? If there's not further discussion, Mr. Moore?
Make a motion to approve the application as submitted.
Second.
Roll call, please. Yeah, Mr. Wise?
This may be a question for the applicant as well, but one of the change with the new mayor has announced is that previously, all the applications or all new bills will by default have first reading at the first board meeting, and then second reading would be at the next board meeting. So if that were to apply in this circumstance, the next board meeting would be on June, I think it's the 15th, and then the next board meeting after that is the July 20th meeting. The exception to that would be if there was a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission included in their motion that 2 readings be done in one night. So I'm not necessarily recommending that that be the case on this one, but something for consideration, particularly on the smaller projects.
Is that included within your motion, Mr. Moore?
Affirmed.
Is that okay with the person that made the second?
Yes.
Any further discussion? Roll call?
David Dibbit,
Yes.
Jennifer Hansen,
Yes.
John Nermer is yes, Jeff Moore,
Yes.
Clint Lewis.
Yes.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, very good, thank you. Mr. Wise, what day can the applicant expect to be before the board?
I believe the date is the June 15th, but I'll touch base with you tomorrow morning.
All right, thank you, Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Commission. Oh, and newsflash, I hear Chick-fil-A is going to open late August, in case you were wondering.
Get in line now.
All right, next item on our agenda is we're back to the comprehensive plan update. You'll recall we spent several meetings on this subject. We went through several site plan meetings, subcommittee meetings with the consultant, and we directed Mr. Wise to put together an RFP for the update, and we also directed him to include within his proposal request for particular analyses to be paid to Strassner Drive, Manchester, and Brentwood. And frankly, Mr. Wise, I thought you did a pretty good job on this comprehensive plan update. Are there any revisions to the RFP as Mr. Wise has submitted it to us? Okay, seeing none, are there any members of the audience who would like to talk to the commission about the comprehensive plan approach? Yes, Ms. Smith, please step forward.
So Karen Smith Harrison. I am not quite sure that I know quite how you're thinking about bringing some of the things that were highlighted in the previous consultant's report, but he did have a couple of different suggestions. And are you thinking that, and I don't think anybody would disagree that we need to have some focus on some areas like around on especially Manchester toward the eastern end. But there are other suggestions that he had in there, and so are you, through this RFP process, are you trying to focus just on specific area and do like some of those sub areas, or are you thinking, and then those other areas would be addressed in later efforts, or were you thinking that this RFP would also address some of the other aspects that were brought forward in that report?
Yeah, to address that, my understanding is that the commission wanted a general update to address generally across the citywide what's the best way to implement this new plan to ensure that we can implement some of these, actually have an implementation schedule as to how to implement these things citywide.
Right,
But particular analysis to be paid to these three areas, which seem to garner the most attention throughout this process.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. White, yeah, go ahead.
One clarification on this as well. When we do go to submit the RFP and put it out, it is our intention that we would attach that previous report that was done for the city as information to point out all of the things that Ms. Smith has pointed out, that there are numerous other recommendations within the report that would be included in this update.
Right. Very good. And I would just suggest, Mr. Wise, on the second part of scope, rather than creation of sub-areas, maybe sub-area focus
Okay.
or sub-area analyses, something along those lines. Because we're not really creating sub-areas, rather we're looking for particular analysis to be paid to those sub-areas. Correct, commissioners?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, any further discussion? Okay. I don't know. Do we need a roll call for this, Mr. Wise?
I would appreciate it.
All right, roll call on, Chair will entertain a motion to direct Mr. Wise to move forward with this RFP.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, or roll call, please.
Clint Lewis,
Yes.
Jeff Moore,
Yes.
John Number is yes. Jennifer Hansen,
Yes.
David Devitt.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thanks. Thanks for putting that together, Mr. Wise. Any aldermen in the audience? I don't see any. See Mr. Former member of the commission just joined us tonight. Mr. McDonald, thanks for joining us.
Speech.
City planners report. Mr. Wise, any report?
One quick update. There was a petition before the commission last month for a building addition down in the Hanley Industrial Court at 2555 Hermelin. There were some questions about sound that had come up. That project is still ongoing. They run into a couple of questions, a couple of issues that they're trying to work out with the stream, and then we're also finalizing our very thorough sound study on that property. So
Very
I
good.
anticipate
Okay.
that that'll be back next
Just
month.
ask a question on
Sure.
that.
Mr. Nuremberger?
Can you find out what exactly they do in that building?
They manufacture pharmaceuticals.
No, I know, they do. And I think it has to do with the Defense Department, and I think it had to do with something that biological or whatever. I just want to know what they do in that site.
We'll look into it.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, May 27th, 6 PM. Who can be there? Very good.
Probably.
All right. Mr. Moore, Mr. Nuremberger, we'll see you guys there as well. All right. Rationale for the board, Mr. Wise, can you handle?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Any other business? We have nomination of officers. Are there any nomination of officers for any of the, well, let's take it one by one. Any nominations for the office of chairman? Mr. Nuremberger?
I would like to make a motion to chairman as Michael Damey.
Do we need a second? I think the nomination stands, and then the next meeting,
Yeah.
we'll take up any further nominations and then vote. Okay, Mr. Nuremberger, any further nominations for chairman? Okay. Are there any nominations for vice chairman? Mr. Nuremberger?
I would like to make a motion for David Demmett.
Any further nominations for vice chair?
No.
Are there any nominations for secretary? Mr. Demmett?
I'd like to nominate John Nurnberger.
Any further nominations? Okay. Seeing none, those nominations will stand until the June meeting, and there'll be an opportunity to submit additional nominations at that point. Any other business?
I just Justin bringing up the change to the, by the mayor, wanting to do the first and second readings. Should we have a little bit of a policy for us as a group when we would, like, letting the applicant know that could be a reality or whatever if they come? Because everybody's going to come to us and say, I want it done 2 readings or whatever. I think it should be a little bit more guidance as far as just making a motion saying we want it 2 readings and that sort of thing. So I don't know exactly what that would look like.
I think the board and the mayor left it fairly open for the commission to kind of determine that guidance on your own. I think one maybe an initial proposal that I would maybe throw your way for entertainment is, if you have a project come through and the commission acts on it in one night and doesn't send it to subcommittee, maybe that would be a good bar to say, okay, where if the commission sends it to subcommittee, then it would also be reasonable for the Board of Aldermen to have the 2 readings on separate nights.
Well, maybe we can make a presentation at the Board of Aldermen and say that's, like, for instance, we're having this 2 of them, 3 of them going to site plan, and then they have to come back to us again. So they're already been through 3 meetings or whatever. If you make them go to 2 other meetings, that all of a sudden that gets pretty lengthy or whatever. So like you said, if they come and we act on it at 1 meeting, and then it should go through the process. And then maybe the next time, if they go through site plan and that sort of thing, I just want to make sure we're not making an undue burden on the applicants that are coming in to do business with us. So,
I think those are great points.
And-
Well, and
and
there's
to fol-
more. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Demmett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to follow up on Mr. Nuremberger's point, the 70 days, my understanding, starts to run either when we get the information or from the night of, I'm not sure. I never quite understood, does the 70 days begin to run when we get the packet on Friday, or does it begin to run tonight?
I think when its applications is submitted.
Neither? It starts earlier than that?
It's generally, my interpretation, I think the answer is the code is not entirely crystal clear on when that clock starts. I think the intention of that section of the code is that within, roughly 2 months, the commission would have a recommendation made.
And that would be my only concern, is that to the extent we start getting into 60, 70 days, if we put it off for a little bit. See my concern?
But that would only apply to commission review.
Yeah. Once we're approving it in the 70 days, and then it goes to Board of Aldermen.
And there's no timetable.
Yeah, there's no
Right,
time. Yeah.
right. But, so you don't think there'd be a problem with the 70 days if we do a first and second at different meetings?
The first and second reading are just for the Board of Aldermen.
Okay,
They don't-
okay.
Yeah,
Right.
they
I
don't.
misunderstood. I thought we were
yeah.
saying we're trying to do that. I'm
No,
sorry.
no, no.
No.
At
So
this
that's
level.
just for when the board physically goes through the readings of the
Okay.
bill. and
Once
approves the
we've
project.
approved it, it goes to Board of Aldermen.
Never mind.
Yeah, and I think all these are good points. You know, we have the directive from the mayor. I understand the logic between having these things taken up at two different meetings. So we'll have the applicant needs to make a compelling case for us to deviate from the default, and we'll just
Right.
leave it to the applicant to do that.
Right.
Any further discussion? Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we stand adjourned.